Time to begin. If I had to pick a single evidence that real love works, it would be my grandchildren, easily. They've been raised with unconditional love from birth, and they exemplify what an unconditionally loved and loving life would look like. Better than all the rest of us would, because to some extent we deal with old wounds. They don't. So it's pretty fun to see them. 2- and 3-year-olds, especially 3-year-olds, are famous for asking why questions. You answer their question, why? Do you know, it never occurred to me until I got this recent little dialogue between my daughter Jeanette and her daughter Sylvie, that what the answer to this question was. Why children keep asking why? Because we haven't gotten to the answer that matters to them. I think I may have alluded to this before. The problem when you speak to a million different audiences in a week, and when you get old simultaneously, is that you can't remember who you told what story. So my daughter writes, Sylvie is at the asking why all the time stage. The only answer she accepts has to do with love. For example, I pull a DiGiorno pizza out of the freezer. Sylvie says, why is the pizza frozen? Now, we think what Sylvie wants to know is, why is the pizza frozen? Because those are the words she used. No, because my daughter said, to keep it fresher, longer. No, Sylvie doesn't care, as she proves when she says, but why does it need to be fresh? Jeanette says, so we have a convenient meal. Sylvie still does not care. She does not care about her parents' convenience. She says, why do we need a convenient meal? Jeanette, it helps me stay calm on a busy day. Sylvie, so why do you need to feel calm? What does she care? And then Jeanette finally comes up with the answer. Because it helps me to love you. Sylvie, oh. End of questions. What do children want to know? Children want to know whether you love them. People ask me all kinds of questions around children. What do I do in this? And what do I do in that? And what do we do when there's a divorce? And what do we do? You first have to make sure that your children feel loved. If you don't do that, it will not go well. It won't. Period. It won't. That's what they want to know. Here's a member who just wrote minutes ago and said, my 26-year-old granddaughter lost her life in an auto accident yesterday. Pretty much no way to be prepared for an event like that. You want to discover what you really believe about life, love, and the meaning of the universe? This will do it. She continues, how can I help her parents? I've never heard my son so devastated. I haven't spoken to his ex-wife since their divorce 15 years ago. I just don't know what to do. First, let me start off by telling you some things not to do. Do not say, I'm so sorry. Shoot. It's distracting. Everybody says it. You have no idea what that phrase means to the person that you're talking to. And what are you expressing? Your pain. And now the other person, in this case your son, will feel obligated to take care of you. I'm so sorry, I'm so sad. So now, in the midst of his daughter dying and everything else that's going on, he has to stop and comfort his mother. Not what he wants to do. Do not offer solutions. People mean well, I know this, but meaning well doesn't count for spit. Because Hitler meant well. Meaning well doesn't mean anything. So don't say she's in a better place. He may not know that or believe that. He may not care to hear it. He may be in the midst of his grieving and just flat want to grieve, and he doesn't want somebody to shortcut the process for him by saying, well, what are you grieving about? It means she's in a better place. Well, you know, if that were true, then why don't we just go out and kill everybody so we're all in a better place? It's not usually what people want to hear. And don't cry. Practice crying before you get there. When we cry, we give to the other person the responsibility of wiping away our tears, and aren't you there to wipe away his? So what do you say? It's really pretty simple. Deaths are all about the survivors, not the people who died. So focus on them. Let me illustrate. If you believe in a glorious afterlife, then death doesn't mean very much, except that we don't get to be with whoever died right this minute. If you believe that death is the end, then there isn't a single comforting thing you're going to say about death at all. But in both cases, you can address the grief, whether it be brief or long, of the living. Listen to their pain. Say something like, say it in your own words, but honey, how do you feel? That may sound like a really obvious question, and sportscasters are famous for this. You know, somebody's just lost the Super Bowl by 1 point in the last 1 second of the game, and the Super Bowl, and the sportscaster says, "So coach, how do you feel about this game?" "Well, frankly, I'm really ecstatic that we lost in the last second." Well, that really is a stupid question. But in death, it isn't stupid, because our grief is about us. We like to flatter ourselves that we grieve for the people who died, but we don't really. We're grieving for ourselves. So how do you feel? You'll discover that the answer isn't so obvious. They might be in pain. They might have questions that you may or may not have the answer to. They might be just angry as hell. And this gives you a chance to listen to them be angry. Not to calm down their anger, to listen to it. They might think, well, this is just totally unfair. Well, yeah, it is. If life were completely fair, then every single person would have died at the age of your granddaughter, 26, poof, we'd all just fall over. So, no, not fair. Turns out that the laws of nature are absolutely cold and unfeeling. Gravity has no feeling at all. She died in a car accident. Momentum has no feeling. Crumpling steel has no feeling. And so it isn't compassionate or fair or kind or any of that. But you give him a chance to talk about it. And we don't do that. I've given this kind of counsel, maybe not exactly these words, to a lot of people who are going to go and comfort those who have just lost somebody dear to them. It works. So the bottom line is, how do you feel? And I'm here for you. Whereas almost everybody who comes to a funeral or a viewing is there to be seen. They're there to be comforted crazily by the family of the person who just died. But that's why they're there. So you're going to do it differently, and it makes a big difference. One woman went to visit her family. There had been a death, family of hysterical victims, and all she did was just go and ask people how they felt and what could she do, and she was there for them. And she said it transformed the overall feeling, the spirit, the energy of the family gathering. So it's about loving again. Paying attention to the pain of the people who are there, for whatever reason, whether it's a death or anything else. I know a man who has been struggling for many years, he and his wife. He runs and she controls. They've had lots of experience with real love, lots of time, watched lots of video chats, read lots of books, individually and in their marriage. And he initiates, this really irritates her, he initiates almost nothing. You know, date night, I love you, sex, whatever. Well, why do you think that is? She's amazed by it. I just don't understand why he doesn't initiate things. Well, because she controls him and criticizes him. So who's going to reach their hand out to shake somebody's hand if they know that they have about a 50% chance of having their hand cut off with a sword? No, you just don't offer your hand. You don't initiate anything. And he doesn't. So Now the story. He wanted to go to a restaurant. He told me this. I asked him how his relationship was going with his wife. And he said, fairly predictably, well, things are okay. Got to remember, in his world, okay means she's not controlling any more than usual. Well, okay sucks. Why would we ever settle for okay? Why not like great? Why not loving? Why not wonderful? So I asked him to describe an incident where recently he had felt uncomfortable. So he said he wanted to go to a restaurant, and he offered to go, and he set up the date. I'm already amazed. So they enjoyed a meal. Came time to go. He used his credit card, and she said, well, we don't need to pay with the credit card. Oh, if I'd been there, I would have said, go to the restroom and stay there for half an hour, and then come back. Here he never initiates anything. He does, and she criticizes the way he does it. Who cares how he pays for it? In fact, I would have been all on board with him just walking out and just stealing the meal because he initiated the meal. He could send the payment in later by check. That's the point, not whether he pays with the credit card. He didn't like being controlled, oddly, and he expressed his displeasure with a couple of words, not especially harsh. He's never dared to speak all that harshly, and with the look on his face. And an argument followed, and it ended in silence, as it has, hundreds of times before. And he told me that he felt bad for indicating that he didn't like her controlling. And I said, no, wrong. You made the choice to go eat. You initiated a loving event. You went to pay, and it was none of her business to comment in any way. None. He felt bad expressing his displeasure at being controlled because she's conditioned him to be controlled and like it, or she'll emotionally beat him up. So he's learned to like it. I said, you have got to stop allowing this. She doesn't mean to, but she bullies you, and you've got to stop it sooner without feeling guilty. I don't mean stop it with a punch in the face or being angry. I mean just go, honey. So when she said, you don't have to pay with a credit card, when I say stop it, I mean just raise his hand and go, I got this. And if she continues to speak, you go, no, I really got this. She'll get the message. He's a big boy. He's 50 years old. He can somehow manage to figure out how to pay for a meal with a credit card. And it really doesn't matter what her reason is. Really doesn't. Later I talked to her. She said that he often acts like he's waiting for her to hit him, emotionally speaking, to be angry or to be controlling. Yeah, I said. She said, it's like he's buffering the blow before it comes. Uh-huh. And do you really want to have a relationship where you see your husband constantly putting his arms up to take the blow that you're about to administer? Probably not. Probably don't want a relationship like that. Another story about grandkids. You're going to hear these now and again. And the reason I tell them isn't out of grandfatherly pride. It's, I just don't have very many places I can go to tell you what it's like for people to behave who are not responding to wounds and who are responding from a loving place. Very few adults can do this, and yet these little grandkids do it all the time, like every day. A friend went over to the house of these particular grandkids and came back saying, when do they fight? I've never seen anything like that in my life. Yeah, me neither. My kids weren't that good. Apparently I did teach them enough, though, that they could raise these grandkids. If only we could have skipped the intermediate step. So Bruce was 2, and he dislocated his elbow. And that has really characteristic signs. I worked in emergency rooms for 6 years, and when a little child, they're almost always 2 or 3 years old, has dislocated their elbow, they walk in and act like their arm is paralyzed, like they've had a selective arm stroke. They're not in pain. They don't look distressed in any way. They simply do everything that they would ordinarily do without the use of the dislocated elbow. And it's a kind of a little emergency room trick. If those of you who work in emergency rooms, if you haven't learned this, you just hold their arm as though you were examining it, and then without saying anything, you just twist the elbow back into place. There's a certain way to do it, and it happens like that. And usually within a minute, the kid has gone back to using his arm normally. So to her credit, I described to Jeanette how to do this over the phone, and though she's not known for being medically brave, she fixed Bruce's arm. So months later, Bruce and Sylvie were jumping on a trampoline, and she was holding his hand, which is sweet. And Jeanette said, "Now be careful, you might hurt Bruce." And Sylvie acted incredulous. "Well, why would holding his hand hurt him?" And she said, "Like the last time. I didn't realize that's how it had happened. I had asked Jeanette, how did Bruce dislocate his elbow? And it's almost always a parent who jerks the child up by one arm. That's how the arm is dislocated." Almost always, like always. And yet she hadn't done that, so I was puzzled. What she didn't tell me at the time, whether it was just because she forgot or being kind, was that when they were jumping on the trampoline, Sylvie had done exactly that with Bruce. And so on this particular occasion that they were jumping on the trampoline again, months after his dislocation repair, she said, "You might hurt him, you remember, like last time." And Sylvie got this concerned look on her face and said, "I broke his arm?" And Jeanette said, "No, honey, it was just an accident. Accidents happen. You didn't know." And Sylvie said, "So it was an accident." She accepted that immediately because her mother pronounced it so. "But I'm still sorry it happened." What a glorious attitude. She had dislocated Bruce's arm, but her mother said, "It's not something worth worrying about. What if all adults could do this? We hurt each other every day. We say unkind things. We get tired and grouchy and we hurt people. And then we feel bad about it for days, hours, weeks, months when we don't really have to. Instead, we could follow the example of a 3-year-old and say, okay, so it was an accident, or it was an inconvenience, or it was unfortunate, or I was tired, or I was unloving and stupid, whatever. And I'm sorry that it happened. There, that's it. But not I'm sorry about myself as a person, and I'm ashamed, and oh, that stuff that we do. Here's a member who writes, "I know because you've said so in many books, speaking to me, when you're angry, you're wrong. Recently, I got angry at a friend for something relatively unimportant that she did. However, I felt as if getting angry was a good thing for me in this particular instance. Normally, when she does what she does, I just stuff it and put up with it. My getting angry was a breakout of sorts. I broke a pattern of me being a doormat, not speaking up for myself, and not speaking my piece, not having a voice. So maybe next time I could handle it with equanimity, but that time anger was a preferable alternative for me. Isn't anger preferable to stuffing it and acting like it's okay with me, being a doormat? I get that the best thing I could do is to just take in the information in a non-judgmental space, but I wasn't capable of doing that." This is a very good question and seductive. So is anger better than stuffing it all your life? Maybe. But because if you stuff it all your life, you turn into a nothing, a voiceless, expressionless carrot. So being angry may be a way to wake up, but I've watched people vent and express their anger forever, and it doesn't make them happy. So I would say, no, anger might be better on the way from going from emotionally dead to emotionally healthy, but almost nobody uses it on the way to becoming emotionally healthy. There's an alternative that almost nobody sees. You get to be angry. When I say anger is wrong, I'm not saying don't be. Be angry, but not with the person you're angry at. It just never works out. You don't really feel loving, maybe a little stronger for a minute, but that's an illusion. And the other person pretty much never feels good. So what's the option? Be angry with somebody who's capable of understanding you and loving you. Now, that works. But being angry at your friend, unlikely that really did either of you any long-term good. Here's a member who says, my question is about my job as a teacher. I've learned a lot from real love that's helped me greatly in my job. I've changed a lot as I recognized my need for love and that I needed to find it and remember that that's what my students need the most. If any of them is acting out, it's because they're not feeling loved. This has really helped me in responding to students in a way that diffuses situations of potential tension or conflict. So far, excellent. Here are the things I do. I use consequences to teach students rather than anger and humiliation and shaming, which I observe being used regularly by colleagues, and a method that I used to use myself. Teaching students about responsibility, reminding them that they have choices, but those choices have consequences. Remembering that teaching kids is a one-way street, not looking to them for appreciation or thanks or attention. This has all helped me a great deal. However, I would like to still be happier and at peace in my work. The fact is that while I work here and I'm employed, I have a certain job to do. I'm paid by the school to teach the students a curriculum and get exam results. I think that's my responsibility. While I'm at the school, I interact with a lot of students, and I know I have many opportunities to impact students' lives in different ways, but I don't really believe fully in what I'm doing, meaning getting exam results. The curriculum is limited by the assessment system. It's like a massive exam factory, and the only thing that is really measured is exam results, and that is the focus. I often wish I could just throw the curriculum out and just do what felt like a fascinating thing to teach for the day, or what particularly caught my interest. But I'm afraid if I did, I wouldn't be fulfilling my responsibility in terms of the job I'm expected to do by management. I'm not really clear what my responsibility is. I feel like a fraud around my colleagues. It is a tragedy that standard education focuses on test results and not the well-being, even the education of the students. The SATs, for example, which have been assaulted for decades, is actually making education worse because teachers teach so that the kids will get better SAT scores, not so they'll be educated. The No Child Left Behind policy, another disaster. So we do all these things because we want to quantify results. Why do we want to do that? Because we as human beings and as teachers don't have the common sense to tell if a child's learning something. It's embarrassing, but it's true. So we have to put numbers to it to prove that we are better people. It's horrifying. You continue. A colleague today asked me about this group we share and how we needed to get the data in and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to say I didn't care about any of it. But I didn't think that would be professional to say. People congratulate themselves on good exam results, and I just think it says nothing. Only that we taught students like circus monkeys to jump through certain hoops. And that's exactly what's happening. You said, I think the school system can destroy kids' innate love of learning. Oh, well, that's been absolutely proven. If you consistently measure students' progress and if you consistently reward what they learn, their innate sense of wanting to learn a thing just because it's fun is destroyed. I loved to learn. I loved it. I loved going to class. I loved reading books. From the time that I was just a little kid, my elementary school librarian used to let me check out, it used to be that you could only check out a book a day, as though somehow you were going to hurt the books, which are of course there to be read. And I finally said to her, I read 5 or 6 books a day. So what do I do? She said, I always remember her. Irish lady, bright red hair, really old, probably younger than I am now. And she said, you can check out all the books you want. So I did. And I did read 5 or 6 books a day. I loved it. What if somebody had come along and said, we're going to test what you're reading? Oh, gag. It would have ruined the whole thing. I still remember how much I enjoyed mathematics. It was fun to take all of these numbers and to juggle them around and come up with these fascinating conclusions and prove theorems and to be able to show how much stress a bridge could take. And I just thought this was so cool. And then they started testing. And I found myself so anxious that I wouldn't get the highest grade in the school, because everybody expected me to, that I'd break out in hives in the middle of the class. Ruined the fun for me. So yeah, we're killing our kids. We're making learning a drag. How many kids, when you say to a kid, what's your favorite thing to do? How many kids say, reading? Nobody. How many kids would admit to their classmates that reading was their favorite thing to do? That would be minus nobody. No. We have virtually trained our kids to go play video games because they're fun. And if they don't like their score, they can reset it and start over again. Whereas we reward or punish them according to their results of their test scores, which establishes, of course, their relative worth as human beings. You say here, people often say to me that I don't teach this student or that student because they're just a pig or they're unteachable, and I'm not really sure what to say to them. Easy. Teach them what you've learned in real love. Say, every kid that I know of who's responding badly to the learning experience is in pain. Pretty much none of these kids comes to school with happy parents who then make their children unhappy, and so by the time you see them, they've been crazy unhappy for, 10, 12, 14 years, however many years it is before you see them. So you just say that in 2 sentences to the person who talks about children as pigs. Oh, can you imagine how well a teacher teaches a class full of what she regards to be pigs? Then you say maybe the only solution is to quit and admit that the system is bigger than me. So follow this. It's not complicated. If you want to be happy, you have to be loving. Period. Now it turns out that you can do that. You can be happy, you can be loving everywhere. Not just at home, not just with children or boyfriend or whatever. You can be happy with you can be loving with your students and get good test results. You want to read how both can be done? Read Under the Bridge, the book. But I warn you, first you have to feel powerfully loved and loving yourself. If you're just less unloving than you used to be before, or if you're loving 50% of the time, you're screwed. You're not going to be able to do both. But if you are genuinely loving, you can do both. Love, teach, and get good test results. But you do what I've done in the years that I've taught. I tell people, I don't give a crap what your test results are. But if you'll listen to me, if you'll follow what we're doing, which is going to seem really strange at times, your test results will be great. So let's say that some of your class time is absorbed by loving, teaching them about relationships. Happier people learn faster, absolutely documented in educational studies. So if you take some of the class time away from the holy curriculum and you teach your kids to be happy, whatever's left with the curriculum, they'll do faster. And if you still need more time, then you do a really novel, crazy thing, which is you tell your kids, we didn't cover all of the material in class today, so when you go home, read pages 25 and 26. You actually suggest they might, read. I found lectures to be mind-numbingly boring, horrifying. It was really clear the teacher didn't care about me or anybody else, and that they were just up there like little machines giving the same lecture that they'd given for the last 20 years since they'd gotten tenure. And so I pretty much skipped medical school. Didn't go to medical school. Pretty much didn't go to college. I got an education at home, reading books. So a little more time loving them, and they'll do fine. And my test scores were just fine. Thank you. We spend way too much time teaching like we're robots and not loving these kids. So you can do both. However, if you feel you can't do both, if you feel like the time you spend loving with them makes your other job, getting test results, impossible, you might have to quit teaching. But keep in mind that you will find this apparent conflict. I say apparent because it's really not, because you really can do both. You'll find this in almost all jobs. Almost all jobs you're going to want to be loving, and your boss is going to tell you to produce product or to produce sales or to teach students. So don't think that changing jobs is the answer. It's changing you that's first. Some businesses do want both. The smart ones realize that if you put love first, the profits follow. There's a book everybody should read called Firms of Endearment. If you have any interest in real love in the workplace, read, of course, Real Love in the Workplace first. But after that, read Firms of Endearment. The author of this particular book and I happened to speak at the same seminar. And after I spoke and after he spoke, he came up, wrapped his arms around me, and he said, I've been teaching this for years. He's a business school professor. And he said, I know that it works. I know the numbers. I know the statistics, but I didn't know why it worked. It's because people want to be loved. He studied 22 companies over a period of 20 years and discovered that these were the 22 companies that he and his students identified as most loving. They simply identified loving characteristics of these companies. Now, they didn't call it love. They called it other things. You know, unconditional, positive regard and respect and blah, blah, blah. It's just love. And he found that over a period of 20 years, they had higher stock valuations than the average by what? 10%? 20%? 50? 100%? No, 1,500%. And now he openly theorizes that if you love people, they work harder as employees. If you love customers, they will never leave you. It's all about love in business and in school teaching. You've got another question here about your boyfriend and studying real love, and I'm going to answer that later when we have a little more time to do that. Here's somebody who says, I was sitting in the middle seat of an airplane. 3 big people all joined at the hip, so to speak. The person on the right said, we are packed in here like sardines. And he wiggled and complained for the whole trip. I felt helpless and guilty. I wasn't 100 pounds lighter for their convenience, while the person on my left happily ate a sandwich and pretzels. I felt content. What can I do in the future to have a happier time while traveling? I've experienced the same thing from people. Well, we just have no room here. One man just kept elbowing me as though if he elbowed me, that particular part of my body would disappear. And so I finally reached over and I tapped him on the shoulder. And mind you, if you do this irritated, you're screwed. But I said, no matter how many times you tap my elbow, I will not get smaller. So what would you like me to do? Well, in other words, he had no idea. He just wanted to be a victim and complain. And his wife reached over and said, why don't you just sit here in your seat like a big boy and be quiet? I'm not saying it will always work out that well. But he's already unhappy. There's no sense you feeling unhappy. You're doing everything you can do. Being packed in like sardines is what we pay for. So we pay for seats that we know are small, then we get on airplanes and we complain about the seats that are small. So you either get on the seat and be happy, or get a first class ticket and you'll have more room. Take your pick. But complaining never makes anybody happier, ever. Here's a woman who says, I've been practicing real love with my kids, 9 and 11, since August last year, when I got custody of them after a nasty divorce. I now know that I absolutely sucked as a parent and did not give them the unconditional love they required. Getting and protecting behaviors abound, and they are rightfully having a hard time trusting me. There is a near constant state of war between them that often escalates into hitting. So you can revise what you said already. You said, I absolutely sucked as a parent. You still do. You just don't know how. So listen to the how. The first thing I would recommend is to read Real Love in Parenting. I cannot tell you how many people call me and ask me specific questions about parenting, and I ask them if they've read the book. Well, no, but I've been meaning to. Really? So you bought a new car, it won't start, you haven't read the owner's manual. It's worth the read. You can't do this by yourself. You need to read the book, and you need a parenting mentor who understands real love. You can find such a person in the free conference calls, you can find a coach, whatever. But we're talking about how many thousands of dollars did you spend to accomplish this, in your words, nasty divorce? So how many dollars are you willing to spend to learn how to be a good mother? Simply accomplishing a divorce just didn't do a thing, because it sounds like the kids went from one unhappy environment to another. They're still not happy. You continue. Bedtime is a nightmare. They share a small bedroom with bunk beds. The youngest has to get up earlier than the older one, who naturally stays up later anyway. They manage to amp each other up with their attacking. They blow past reasonable bedtimes. Why do they roll past reasonable bedtimes? Answer, because you let them. Children do not continue behaviors that don't reward them. They're not listening to you. You do not know how to parent them, and so they're just ignoring you. You are like background noise to them, like the buzzing of flies. You said, I've tried as a natural consequence separating them. That sounds like a natural consequence, but it really sucks. As parents describe to me all the things that they do to help their children behave better, listen carefully, like right now, separating them. They're all things that involve you doing the work. They didn't buy into you separating them. They didn't learn a thing. All they learned was you were bigger than them, so you can separate them. That's not parenting. And as you said here, that hasn't worked. So it doesn't. So why keep doing it? If you keep doing the same thing that doesn't work, that's called stupid. The older boy says that he's afraid of ghosts and other night noises and refuses to move. Oh, you're such a sucker. I mean, he manages to go to bed every night, so he manages to get over his fear of ghosts and night noises. He only uses that little ploy with you, and you buy it. My couch in the living room is broken and uncomfortable, and it's hard for me to justify to the younger one that he always and only gets the negative consequences. Geez, honey, you are an easy mark. Give me your phone number and I'm going to convince you to give me all the money that you have, because you would. I would just have to use the same phrases your children use. You fall for stuff easily. So read Real Love in Parenting, which answers pretty much everything you're asking. Then you love and teach, and you have to do this consistently. If you love and teach half the time, you're not going to accomplish a thing. It turns parenting into Las Vegas. It's like a roulette wheel. You have to make bedtime enjoyable. Let's assume that bedtime is 8 o'clock. Then you start to get ready for bed at 7. You send them off to brush their teeth, go to the bathroom, whatever it is, get in their jammies. You don't do it. They're 9 and 11. In 150 years ago in England, at 9 and 11, you were working full-time, 14 hours a day on a weaving machine and running the thing. Now, I'm not saying that was a really great idea, but it shows you that kids are capable of doing stuff far earlier than we think, and yet we do it for them. No, have them do it. And you tell them that if they're completely done by 7:30, then you will read to them, tell them stories, you're going to get fairy tale books, you're going to do whatever it takes so that bedtime is the funnest time of their lives. Ask my kids what the funnest time of their lives was. Bedtime, hands down. They got all my time, they got stories and me singing, and it was fun. Then, so if they're not done by 7:30, they don't get bedtime. They don't get your stories and all that other stuff. And they'll howl and scream, and if you give in, you're an idiot. They're howling and screaming to see if you're going to give in. And it's pretty clear from what you've said so far, you do. You do give in. This wouldn't be happening. Bedtime is a nightmare for us. No, it's a nightmare for you. And then you let them act like crazy little mindless Indians. You're not being consistent. After you've loved and taught, then you can apply natural consequences, which increase in intensity. And you have to apply them consequences they hate, and you have to apply consequences every single time that loving and teaching don't work. There can be no anger. No anger in your house. That's one of the first things you're going to teach them. You're going to read the parenting book and it'll teach you how to do this in a family meeting. There will be no contention. In your own words, you say that they amp it up. Well, do you get in the message here? That means they start small, you don't do anything. And then it gets bigger and you don't do anything, and it gets to mid-level and you don't do anything, and it gets to a 7 out of 10, you don't do anything. And then when it becomes absolutely intolerable, you come in and do something. Well, they're willing to play this game. They're happy to. You have to say there's going to be none. That means every single time a child is angry, unkind, pushes, shoves, says something hateful, you stop everything and you talk about what this means. You say, so were you being loving to your brother? Read the parenting book. It'll tell you all about how to do that. You're not being consistent. And if they don't listen to that, oh, it gets really easy. You just pick the things they hate. They like sleeping in their beds, so then you just alternate. Every other night, one of them sleeps on the couch. And I don't care what kind of good... In fact, I would hope that there are springs sticking up out of your couch and poking them, because you want to make the consequences unpleasant. Whoever fights gets no bed at all. If somebody keeps ignoring you, then you have them go in and help you and take apart their bed and take it to the garage. There. Now you can't have an older child who says, I'm afraid of ghosts, Mommy. I'm not afraid of fighting with my brother and with jerking you around, but I'm afraid of ghosts. Oh, whoa, ridiculous. Now he has no bed at all. So now he gets to sleep on the floor with the ghosts, because that's where ghosts live, you know. If that doesn't work, you remove all the electronic devices that they have. Everything. You make life absolutely intolerable for them. You put them to bed earlier and earlier. Instead of going to bed at 8, they have to go to bed at 7. And whoever fights the most is the one who gets the most consequences. So if you have to put a kid to bed at 7 o'clock and lock the door, then you do that. One mother called me and said, my son just took a hammer to the door and tore down the door. Oh, easy. I said, call the police, and the police put him in juvenile detention. I said, how did he like the rules there? Were they better than home? You have to be willing to go up and up on the consequences until they finally get it, that their unacceptable behaviors are also unpleasant for them. As it is now, their unacceptable behaviors are only really unpleasant to you, and frankly, they love it. You said, I tried moving him into my tiny room, but the older one sees that as unfair, since then that gives the younger kid, more time and positive attention with me. Too bad. Then that would be a perfect natural consequence for that kid, wouldn't it? So when the kid says, it's not fair, kids love that. You say, no, it's perfectly fair. I told you that if you did this, then the younger boy, your brother, would come and sleep with me. So you're the one that chose this. Wow, So it seems kind of dumb for you to be complaining about something being unfair when you chose it. That's the attitude you have to take with them. You have to virtually laugh at the ridiculousness of their arguments. Right now, here's all it takes on your part to get a kid to keep doing this stuff with you, to make bedtime a nightmare. When they do their behaviors, all they're looking for from you is this. All you have to do is wrinkle your brow and they win. Children are told all day long what to do. Eat this, do that, put this on, take recess here, go to class, read this book. And then they come home and you tell them what to do and they go, oh, Mom's way stupider than the teachers. They won't put up with this crap. Mom's way stupider than the principal. Mom's way stupider than the bus driver. So all we have to do is amp things up with Mom and she'll go, and then the kid goes, we win. And then they do whatever they want to do. And by the time you apply consequences, it's way bloody too late. So honey, you're not being the mother. It's really this simple. You're being like one of the kids. They're having a fight and you're fighting with them. So set the rules and the consequences and then apply them every single time without fail. And you just won't believe how much easier your life's going to get. Here's a member who says, I'm asking for an opinion on something. Came to the right place. I will endeavor to be as brief as possible. I've always struggled with control, as you pointed out, virtually from our first interaction. I met this particular man on the phone, and within 4.5 seconds, I said, you're a controller. What? How did you know that? It's just not all that hard. Sometimes people are amazed. They say, well, how can you know? You can't know that about me within 4.5 seconds. Can you tell the difference between a chicken and a watermelon? Well, yeah. Well, how? Well, experience. I mean, they're not the same at all. And that's how hard it is for me to see your behavior. After you've seen controlling and not controlling for enough tens of thousands of times, picking out controlling really just doesn't take Mr. Wizard. You continue. I have a power addiction which manifests itself through control and manipulation. Just like any addict, I struggle every day with it and rely on those close to me to tell me when I'm being controlling and wrong, which of course is really dangerous. Because it's good to ask them to tell you when you're controlling. But see, if you're controlling, you've created an environment where they're not likely to tell you. Controllers make people's lives so unpleasant when they don't do what the controller wants that they do what the controller wants. So if you're already making people's lives unpleasant and intimidating, what are the odds that they're going to actually tell you when you're being controlling? They're really teeny. This control is always worst with regards to money, which is the reason for this email. Money is often the subject for control because gaining and losing it is quantifiable. There are numbers. You can see it. You've always talked about relationships and marriage as a partnership, and I realized even before meeting Susie that a partnership is what I wanted. I always used my money as a way to control in previous relationships. I pay for everything so that I make all of the decisions. Good call. Now that's an example of truth-telling. Yeah, you pay for things so that then you can control it, just like the United States government does. The United States government is not a beneficent benefactor. No, they give you money so they can control what you do with it. I'd always thought that I wanted that type of control, but my relationships always fail because eventually I begin to see my partner as a dependent and not a partner. Good for you. Being in control really is an addiction, so it's hard to give up. But if we don't give it up, it guarantees our unhappiness and destroys every relationship. So, you continue. Susie and I talked about going on a cruise this summer for vacation. She and her 2 kids, my son and I, we talked about dates and pricing and had a conversation about cost sharing, and I want your input. I suggested splitting the cost 50-50. Susie then asked about what 50-50 meant. And I said, well, equal. We both have a say in where we go on vacation. We participate equally. I asked her what she thought. She said that she thought that I should pay a portion of hers. I then explained that in my head I was already planning on paying a portion of hers. And she said, How so? I said, well, there are 5 of us. My son and I are only 2. That's 40%. And I was going to split it 50-50. So I'm actually paying a portion for her. This is very clever of you. I also stated that due to the fact that I've been on numerous cruises, I have some onboard credits that we could use and so on. And this is where it got all kind of tense, because she wanted me to pay more and I got a lump in my throat because I don't want to feel like a sugar daddy. In other words, always say it in easy terms that everybody understands. You don't want to feel like you're being used. That's what you don't want. Now, here's the irony. In order to keep from being used, you control other people, which is using them. So really what's going on here is you as the controller simply use people first before they can use you. Not exactly a loving way to solve this. If I pay for the whole thing, which I could, it's not even an issue for me financially. And then I end up with what I had in my last relationship, which is a dependent, not a partner. See, this is sneaky the way you see it, and you don't do it intentionally. So listen with fresh eyes. Let go of what you think you know. Why? Because it hasn't worked. And what I'm sharing with you here works consistently. Works every time people do it. In a partnership, the point is not, let me back up, not to bring equal resources to the relationship. No, that's not a partnership. Otherwise, you'd have to find somebody who made exactly what you made in a year, who is exactly your height, who is as strong as you. You'd have to marry you. Well, I wouldn't want to marry me. Would you really want to marry you? The point is that each partner brings everything he or she has. You bring everything you have and everything you are, and your partner does the same. You both put all of that, whatever it is, into the communal partnership pot and share it. Nobody controls. You just give and both benefit. Illustration. Donna and I married. I was making tons of money. She came with the clothes on her back. So how do we split the finances? We didn't. I put everything I had financially into the shared finances. She didn't have anything to contribute financially. We then both shared the benefits of everything we brought. Now listen, money, personality, service, kindness, love, and so on. What if your partner brings more love than you do? Which I would kind of bet in this particular case, since I know both of you, she does. So how do you put a financial number, how do you put a price on the love that she brings into your relationship? Whoa, you don't. And in fact, if you did put a price on the love that she gives you, I would suggest that you're going to end up the poorer for it. You're going to look like the slacker financially. But we don't do that. We don't count. So what if one person brings most of the unconditional love? Would that then give, because you just said, because you give more of the money, you have the right to control what happens to the money. So if somebody brings most of the love, would that then give them the right to make the emotional decisions of the partnership? No. There's no controlling. Just sharing and giving and mutual benefiting. I've been asked this question a great number of times. The people who listen end up much happier. Those who decide to do it their way, to put numbers on what they bring, but notice, you didn't put numbers on the intangible asset she brings. It doesn't bother me, but you end up arguing about who gives what, and you lose the relationship, which you've already done. So why keep doing what hasn't worked? You've already proven it doesn't work. So what do I recommend? You assume that you two are really working toward a partnership, which you said in the beginning of this email. And you said paying for the cruise you could do easily. Wasn't even a big deal. So you wouldn't worry about 50-50. You just say, I'll pay for the whole thing. You need that experience just to see what it's like. To pay for the entire vacation, and the two of you have equal say in what you do on the vacation. I just took my grandson, son, another son, and a fiance, they're now married, but they weren't then, on a cruise. And they each contributed nothing, financially speaking. And they all had an absolutely equal say in what we did. In fact, everybody got to do exactly what they wanted to do. That's how real relationships work out. You give everything you have, and it turns out you get to do anything you want. So pay for the darn cruise. You can more easily afford it. So just do it. You have more money than she does, so you'd say, well, I'd be just really happy to. So I'm not telling you what to do. Not going to go over the numbers, how much you make, how much she makes, doesn't really matter. I'm telling you to completely change your idea what a partnership is, and wow, will you like the results. Just a suggestion. Here's a parenting question that's going to take much longer than the 3 minutes we have left. So let's see what we got that's shorter. Yeah, this is shorter. Today, my sister finds out about her college admissions. I don't want to treat her like she's a function of where she gets in, as my mother is sure to do. So how can I do that? I'm sure your mother will be all the prouder of her if her daughter gets into one of the Ivy League schools, for example. Oh, we're so proud of you. All somebody has to do is come into the room and say, I went to Harvard, and everybody's impressed, except for me, because I know a vast number of people who've been to Harvard and not impressed. The qualifications for getting in are more stringent, and what they turn out is not emotionally smarter, like at all. In fact, being too smart is often an emotional handicap. So we tend to value people, just like the school teacher asked earlier, on the scores they get, the schools they get into, the money that they make, because all that stuff is quantifiable. Well, it's tragic. So what can you do that's different? No matter where she tells you that she's getting in, ask her questions about, guess what? Her. Focus on her, not how good she is, her, and what she's going to learn, how much fun. So you're going to Princeton. Well, where is that? Tell me what you like about Princeton versus the other schools. What will your curriculum be at Princeton that would have been different than some other place? Say, shorter college here in Rome, Georgia. Turns out there was a study done just only 3 or 4 years ago that showed where people end up in earning power and job satisfaction depending on what school that they went to. Turns out that the people who went to the Ivy League schools did not do better than the average first-tier schools. And when I say first-tier schools, I mean like the first 200 schools, not like the top 10, first 200. No, it's really a function of who you are. And the criteria that are used by the top schools to let you into their school turn out to be a really poor measure of who you are as a human being. So ask her what she's excited about. Express excitement for the opportunity that this is going to be for her. Ask her lots of questions about where she's going to live and does she know anybody there. The focus is on her. You're going to do with her what I do with my grandchildren when they show me a picture that they've colored. I don't ever say, wow, that is some great artistic talent you have. What a great picture. That's exactly what ruins kids' fun in drawing. Do you know why people draw? Kids draw? Kids draw with crayons because they, drum roll, like it. And when we assess their performance, we actually make it less fun. Now they have to perform for us. So it turns out, at root, hopefully your sister still has just a little bit of desire to go to school because it would be, well, fun and educating. So talk to her about that. What do you see happening to you there? That's what I do with my grandkids. I point to the little green squiggly thing that makes no sense to me, whatever in the picture, and I ask them, what's that? And they tell me, well, that's a tree, or it turns out that's you. Whatever. You show no fear and no artificial pride, just an interest in her. Your mother will be anxious that your sister gets into the right place. You will not. Bottom line, the emphasis is on your sister, not your appraisal of where she goes to school. Gee, surprise, it's always about real love. So despite what appears to be like quite a variety of answers that we give, the focus is really, like we talk about every time, it's all about the feeling. So focus on the feeling. Find the feeling. Trust the feeling. Remember the feeling. And you'll be happy.